I'm Jeff Wilson. I'm president and CEO of Precipitate Gold Corporation. Precipitate is a junior Canadian company exploring in the Dominican Republic, where we have three separate projects, one of which is under an earn-in with Barrick Gold, where Barrick is spending $10 million US over 6 years to earn a 70%. And then we've got two other assets that we own 100% and are exploring, one adjacent to GoldQuest mining in the Toreo Gold Belt and another near Barrick's Pueblo Viejo mine site.
Great to see you, Jeff. Been a while. Wanted a quick update. There's been a bit of news in country. We always get like inbound about what the heck's going on in the Dominican Republic, and I think GoldQuest may have given us part of that answer recently. What can you tell us?
Yeah, there's been a couple of fairly positive pieces of news, specifically out of GoldQuest, but also out of another junior explorer called Unigold. And what we've seen is information coming out of the Dominican government, specifically out of the environmental department, that has streamlined processes and sort of created some simplicity and a sort of a clarity of path for conducting environmental impact studies. And that's sort of been a bit of a stumbling block or a log jam in the process of moving projects in the Dominican Republic from exploration through development. And so what we're seeing recently here is a willingness and a desire from the government to move those processes forward so that everybody can have a better understanding of the specific environmental impacts that these projects may have.
Okay, so they're at the table. That's something. And the environmental process, is this any different from any other jurisdiction that miners have to operate in? And we're talking about just a different order of play here. I mean, is it really good news or not?
Yeah, in fact, it's been a frustration, I think, for some of us operating in the country up to this point, whereby some of the processes in the Dominican Republic were a little bit backwards, in our opinion. So what this sort of augment here that we're looking at really aligns the Dominican Republic's processes more in line with other sort of environmentally friendly mining jurisdictions like Canada, like the United States, and other parts of the world, where an environmental impact study would be part of the process before getting to an application for an exploitation or a mining license. And so that's sort of what we're seeing unfold here in the DR, and I think it's a positive step.
Okay, so we can expect what GoldQuest to do what as a result now? What's the process for them? Because that's going to have big implications for yourself and like say Unigold, et cetera, as to how you think about things going forward.
Yeah, I think what we've seen, and again, I communicate with some of our peer groups like GoldQuest and their management teams fairly frequently, but what we're seeing not only in my conversations with them, but in the news releases that they put out, sort of in two key things. One is they're going to, there's a process here to do the application for the environmental impact study specifically, and we expect that to be delivered in some, whether it's a couple 2 to 4 months, something like that. And along with that process, upon receipt of that permission to move forward, also at sort of the same time, there will be a pre-feasibility study conducted by GoldQuest. So there'll be both, sort of geotechnical and sort of necessary bankable feasibility style work that GoldQuest will be doing in and around its current deposit. But they also have indicated that they plan to now, with this better clarity, start to allocate some money toward their own exploration and multiple other targets within the project at GoldQuest that justify or warrant additional exploration and drilling. So I think you're going to see activity ramp up a fair bit out of GoldQuest and perhaps others.
Okay, so it's really important. This is a delicate little dance here. You kind of got the politicians saying, look, we're the ones that are going to be held accountable here. So we need you guys to be best practice through every phase of this and ultimately give us the information to give us the comfort that you are doing things the right way. So there's that kind of pressure on there. But it also, GoldQuest are setting the tone and the standards for companies that come up behind it. So if they get this wrong, it's not good for you guys. But if they get it right, it kind of opens the door a little bit more.
By any measure, it's still important for all of us as an industry to be mindful of the fact that, this opportunity to push forward and move forward on an environmental impact study, part of that, or major part of that, is still going to be consultation and collaboration with local communities and business leaders and local smaller politicians. So, this is not necessarily carte blanche, go ahead and run with it. There's still going to be, obvious sensitivities about how we as a sector in that country manage, the interests of local people. But being equipped with the results of an environmental impact study is such a critical tool to be able to evidence, what these potential mines actually mean and actually do. And if we can evidence, and when I say we, as a sector, that these are going to be done under best practices and the same kinds of practices that we would apply whether we were working in Canada or any other part of the world, is important. That transparency with locals and being able to deliver this environmental impact study and a feasibility study, I think allows us to put everything on the table as we move toward, as a sector, as we move toward mine construction and implementing mining operations.
Right. Okay. One of the other things that they announced, so actually, let's be really clear. This is significant change in narrative from all parties, right? We've moved on to a different phase of the conversation about what could be. It felt like the door was closed. It feels like let's talk about what this could look like if we did move ahead. So that's positive. The other thing they GoldQuest did announce was the raising of some money, but it's where that money came from that kind of intrigued me. What can you tell us?
Yeah, very, very I think important sort of 1-2 punch with respect to the news releases that they announced in recent weeks. So on the one hand, they announced that they're going to move forward with their environmental impact study. And then secondly, they announced the financing, a sizable financing, over $8 million, $8.5 million, something like that. And indicated in that press release that the money was coming from Dominican investors and wealthy Dominican groups out of the DR. And I would think it's logical to assume that these are groups that have not necessarily traditionally been mining investors, but I think see the opportunity for mining to be a significant part of the economy and for there to be economic benefit to the country, as Dominicans themselves sort of recognizing that this can be net beneficial to all, and to see them coming in as investors to the tune of $8.5 million, I think is a very significant indication that there's a willingness in country to want to see these projects move forward because they're net beneficial to all.
Okay. Well, I don't know who those buyers are and how influential, or if it's just across the board, but I think that's a very good indication. Obviously, GoldQuest have suffered through this whole process. They're up. They were at 9 cents for most of last year, up 4 times that today, which is obviously it's been a long time coming. Are they in a position to actually kind of move this thing forward now, or do you think they're going to? It's been a case of let's shore up our balance sheet and maybe find a partner to do this, or what are the you talk with them a lot?
Yeah, I think they are in a good strong financial position now. I think coming into this financing, I couldn't say what the exact number is, but they probably had, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but maybe around $7 million, something like that. So on the back of this latest financing, they're probably a round number somewhere in the $15 million mark. And so I think, well financed to move this process forward and take a good chunk out of a feasibility study cost as well. And again, as I say, I think there will be an allocation of additional exploration dollars for some of these secondary targets within their project as well. So I think that, what are they trying to do? I think one of the things that we've all been trying to do is to create a path where if you find it, you can build it. And whether, that's GoldQuest themselves, or perhaps this new reality is going to draw some additional eyeballs from, major companies or mid-tier companies or even junior producers who look at this region now as a place where, you can have some clarity of path and you can move a project forward. And so you may start to see some additional interest in this country, and specifically in this region, because as I say, aside from GoldQuest, there's also a company called Unigold, a little further up the belt, but again, a couple of million ounces in a current resource that they are also looking to progress through an environmental impact study and towards production, and also have a significant amount of ongoing exploration targets. So this could be a region with those two players along with Precipitate, where you may start to see much more activity and results coming out of this area.
Okay, well, look, this isn't the GoldQuest interview. This is Precipitate Gold interview. So let's get into implications from all of that update, all of that data from in country. From the implications for you are what?
Yeah, this is significant for us, and I think the market hasn't quite cottoned on to all of what we've just discussed quite yet. GoldQuest has seen a nice bump in their share price, no question. But, typically when we've seen GoldQuest share price go up, we've seen Precipitate and or Unigold sort of get dragged along with them. We haven't really seen that yet. So part of, what we will be doing in the coming weeks and months here is to, put out information to the market that indicates what our plans are now going forward. And part of that for sure will be starting to get, reactivated on our Juan de Herrera project, which is immediately adjacent to GoldQuest. We're right up against their claim boundary over about a 40-kilometer distance. And so there's lots of targets on our project that we have delineated in the past, some of which are drill permitted and drill ready. Others, through work that we were doing earlier this year, have just emerged. We put out some news releases in August where a couple of new target areas were identified with some very high grade. We were getting rock samples over 70 grams per ton gold, for example, and some nice contiguous, consistent trench sampling as well. So in some newly emerging zones. So there's lots of areas within the property for us to re-engage. And we've had boots on the ground over the last couple of months. We expect to increase that activity as we get into next year. And the objective here would be to try to advance multiple targets to a drill stage here in the near term. And so as Matt, we've been sitting on a fairly healthy treasury here over the course of the last, year or so. We did a transaction with Barrick that put, $5 million US into our treasury. And although we spent a lot of time looking for something else and other places to deploy that capital while we were waiting for the DR to give us the green light, so to speak, we never did find that thing that we thought justified the pivot. And, I'd always sort of thought that perhaps a blessing in disguise might be that as we preserve this treasury, the DR sort of comes back into play, and perhaps that's feels a little bit like what we're starting to see here now. And so, with a healthy treasury of just under $5 million Canadian, we're well positioned with 100% ownership of all of these properties. There's no option payments. There's no work commitments. We can use our discretion to decide where and when we want to deploy capital.
Right. Okay. Well, there was actually the next question. Like, I think you possibly with this timing got lucky, and sometimes in mining that's you need a whole heap of, especially off the back of the last few years. So you've got the treasury to decide how you go ahead. Is it? I guess you're going to be tippy-toeing forward here and see what news comes out in the next few weeks. But when you say boots on the ground, what does that actually convert to?
Yeah, well, there's multiple zones within the project that are highly prospective, where we've done some work. Again, this trenching that I just mentioned, these trenches are open-ended in multiple directions, and we just did that work in the summer, and we did a little bit of follow-up in the fall. There'll be some results to come back out of that. So, boots on the ground means let's better sort of flesh out, some of these zones, because we really haven't found the edges or the outer limits of a lot of these sort of anomalous mineralized areas. Again, because our view was, if there's not some sort of clarity in terms of the eventual outcome, why go and spend a bunch of money on projects or a project when, you don't know what the return on investment will be and where the sentiment from the market is uncertain. So as we clear that path, I think there's lots of areas where we could, increase activity. And by boots on the ground, that could be additional prospecting, sampling, trenching. That could be some geophysical work. We've done some IP in some of these areas that's been very beneficial to, sort of refining drill targets. And of course, drilling. Ultimately, we would love to be in a position where we get back to, what really is what moves the needle in this sector. And that's, exploration and discovery type drilling. And that's what we'd like.
So that's the activity. Let's talk about the end game here, because we're so focused and we're being so kind of boot on the back of the neck with the Dominican Republic political situation that we forget that conventional exploration is so darn hard too. So with a portfolio of assets, with a bunch of cash now, you're going to have to be careful how you allocate that, and you got to work out really quite quickly what's the message to market on the assets that you've got. If it's just going to be a conventional, raise money drill type venture, or do we look at some of the kind of structures, which some of the kind of partnerships that are going on in country already?
Yeah, I mean, I think the world is our oyster a little bit in that regard. And I mean, all we can really sort of focus our strategy on is the things that we control. And so in terms of the things that we control in the near term, we absolutely can get more aggressive in exploration and putting money towards advancement of the projects, or specifically the Juan de Herrera project next to GoldQuest. We've got Barrick spending money on our Pueblo Grande project, and we expect some news to come out of that in the coming weeks. And we'll see what plays out there. Again, that doesn't cost us anything, and Barrick's got a right to 70% of that. But until they earn, that's 100% ours, and the results will be what they are. But yeah, I think that as we see this GoldQuest situation unfold, I have to think that there's some additional eyeballs that are starting to take a look at what they have, and I think, quite frankly, I think there's a lot of people within our business that have looked at that Romero project and deposit in the past, and perhaps have a bit of a file on it somewhere, and have kind of put it on hold to sort of see how this plays out. Again, I think anytime you get this sort of additional clarity, project is starting to advance, it could be that there's a consolidation or a regional play that comes into effect here. But again, that will be dictated by, how and what kind of interest GoldQuest generates. But in the meantime, our objective is to try to identify as much value as we possibly can at Juan de Herrera. If that proves to be a standalone project that we move forward, great. If that ends up being something that is part of a larger, bigger picture consolidation play, happily entertain those opportunities if they arise. But in the meantime, we need to be focused on moving our project forward and generating results that can add value for our shareholders.
Must be a relief to actually think about finally getting things moving.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, in junior exploration space, I mean, you don't get up in the morning getting excited about, the status quo and going sideways. And so it's been a challenge for us as a management team to sort of stay the course. But I will say that I've spoken, throughout this process, I've spoken with a lot of shareholders, including some in the last few days here on the back of this recent GoldQuest news, who are all really quite happy and satisfied, and I think supportive of the fact that we've not allowed ourselves to get too distracted with a we need to do something kind of mentality, which is is natural for all of us entrepreneurial people that want to go out and do something. So yeah, but it took some time, it took some patience. We've seen a really loyal shareholder base hang in there with us, and I think this is what they've been hanging in for, is this green light to go on, where we can start to leverage what we believe is a very prospective project that's not getting a lot of value in our current market cap, and start to get some value put back into that through ongoing work, and perhaps even reminders of what we already have and the results that we've already put together, because they've probably been forgotten by a big part of the market. So there's lots of work here to be done.
Why don't we end on that bit? You put out some news in August and October. I mean, the grades we're talking about here with these gold samples and trenching that you're doing, something to be excited about, I'm sure. So why don't you remind? Why don't we finish on that high point? You remind us about some of those grades and perhaps what that's potentially could lead to.
Yeah, no, we did a bunch of work again, sort of quietly in the background, where we sampled a broad grid of sampling, soil sampling, float sampling throughout the project. And as we started to sort of get closer to feeling like there was an election in the country last spring and some changes this summer, we thought, okay, let's start to revisit some of this stuff. And lo and behold, when we threw some of those samples into the lab, because they'd just been XRF scanned prior to that, when we put them in the lab, lo and behold, a number of new anomalous, highly mineralized zones came out of that, places we'd never really spent any time before. Okay, great. Let's go back to those, which we did, and do some more detailed follow-up in these areas. And that was some of the news that we put out last August, where we identified 8 new mineralized zones within the project. We went back and did follow-up. 2 or 3 of those really stood out to us as being consistently mineralized, and areas where we went in and did some sampling and identified grab samples, rock samples, again, as I said, up to 73.8 grams per ton gold, which is one of the highest single samples anywhere in the belt. So higher than anything that's been reported by GoldQuest or ourselves in the past. So really anomalous, really high grade. We went back in, we did some trenching in that area. That's an area called the CN zone. And again, we did a couple of trenches, 3 trenches. And again, we got good, consistent grade over significant widths, like 32 grams over 5 meter widths kind of thing. So these areas are going to, see more work. But at the same time, there were a number of other areas. There's an area on a project called the Southeast Zone, where, again, there's a big outcropping, sort of a rock face, where we got a 13% copper sample off of that. And again, these zones are open in multiple directions, because we just didn't go back and spend the time and money there when there was all that uncertainty about the jurisdiction. So these are just a couple of the many places within our property package where we think there's some very compelling high-grade material that perhaps has either been forgotten or overlooked by the market. And I think that this latest news is going to give a little bit more context to that if we're able to have some consistency where we can go back and do some more sustained exploration programs and advance those projects.
Jeff, appreciate your time today. Exciting 2025 lined up. Stay in touch. Let us know how you get on, okay?
Thanks, Matt. Always appreciate it.